Hello and welcome back to Mom's Maths and Manuscripts. The episode you're going to hear today is part 2 of my conversation with Sónia, where she goes into more details about her freelance career, the challenges and the good parts of being a freelancer, the skills that she developed through her academic training, and also where academia and academic conditioning might be of detriment for a freelance career or, well, possibly any other career that you're going to do after. There's going to be some advice, there's going to be some inspiration, potentially some more cat appearances or cat jokes, and I hope you enjoy this. Without further ado, let's welcome Sónia back in.
Through all of my search and all of my blog posts and all the newsletters I subscribe to and all of the resources, it's really a lot, some things did resonate with me. And at some point on LinkedIn, I was just scrolling. And I saw this free event in Lisbon of the Medical Writers Association. So there's this European association and they do a conference. And the first day of the conference was going to be broadcasted for free in different hubs. And Lisbon had a hub and it was free. You just had to sign up. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to sign up. And so I went. And there is the first time, of course, before I had no idea what medical writing was. So before I signed up, I went to read a bit about it. And then I was like, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to learn more about it. Because that's the first day of the conference, is the basics of the profession. And through that, I met the Portuguese people who are at least some professionals in Portugal. And they are very supportive. We were very few in the room, so we all had time to introduce ourselves. And I said, I'm actually just, sightseeing a bit. I have no experience in this. But then when I started to introduce my background, they said, you actually have experience in this because you have papers. And papers are an output of medical writing. You have grants, which is an output of medical writing. And then you start to realize, wait, I actually have experience, because medical writing, and I use more the term scientific writing for people to understand better, because medical writing is just not necessarily medical. A big part of it is medical writing, but publications fall into medical writing. And so all types of scientific writing, you could call yourself medical writing, or you can call yourself scientific writer. It's just the search terms for different companies will be different. So in the end, I realized, I actually have experience. I didn't necessarily want to be a freelancer because, having a stable contract is slightly better for your mental health and to actually be able to, support your family and, buy a house and have bills paid. And you only have to wear the employee hat. But I started to apply for a lot of companies. Good part about medical writing, there's a lot of remote jobs because you're just writing at home. So no one really cares. It's actually cheap than having an office for you, or cheaper than having an office. And so I started to apply to a lot of companies. And then I started to realize that it's very hard. A lot of them are pharma based. So you have to be very technical in pharma. Most of them ask for experience. So then you go into these loopholes where you need to have experience. So I stopped applying for a company because I would apply for a junior position. They would email me to say, because of your PhD, you have to apply for a senior position. So they transfer my application to senior position to then reject me because I have no experience. And I'm like, yeah, but that's why I'm applying for the junior position. Yeah, but you have a PhD, so you're a senior person, but you have no experience. So I was like, okay, I give up. You are not understanding my problem. I don't mind starting from the bottom. I don't care about having a PhD. And some people told me, just take the PhD out of your CV. And I'm like, yeah, how do I justify 5 years of my life? It's not something, and I want to be honest, I do have this PhD. I don't necessarily need a big salary. I don't need you to value that PhD, but it's part of who I am. And so it was very hard. And then all of this was going on. One of the contacts that I've met through that event reached out to me, and I said, she's a freelancer. And she said, look, I have this project, but I'm not being able to pick it up. But it's a client that I have. It's a long-term client. So I also don't want to say no. Do you want to help me doing this project? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I can help you. Yes. And so we worked together on this project, which is writing a literature review. Yeah, it's about a disease, but it's writing a literature review. And so we did that project together. And then I was like, wait, I can actually do this. And yeah, then I started as a freelancer, not knowing anything about how to get clients and projects. And actually, what I did was not a very conscious decision, it was more like, oh, I'm going to help you. With that, I had to change my status, financial status and stuff. And then it was like, you know what? Now I can apply to jobs, but I also can apply to these projects. So I started to apply to both. And then I got a project. which was a whole shit show, and it went so terribly bad. And it was so with academics in another
Is there a pattern
institute.
there?
Yeah, there's always a pattern there. They want to pay very little and want you to do everything. And then all of a sudden the PI, so as a freelancer, you can work on different aspects and you can work on a different terms with people. So there was like, there's this project and we want you to manage the project and do the writing of the project and everything. I was like, fine, I don't mind this. What I do mind is calling me at 10 p.m. with things that can be an email. Yeah, one of the things I've asked is, are you going to pay me by hour or by deliverable? And they said, we don't care how many hours we work. This is the amount of money. Okay. And all of a sudden they're like, you're not working enough hours. And I'm like, wait, you said you didn't care how many hours I worked. If the project is moving forward and it can do it in half of the time, that's on me, not on you. So there was a lot of problems there. Eventually, when it was time to renew the project, they wanted to pay me less money because I was working less hours. I'm like, yeah, but that's because I'm actually doing the job in less hours. That's on me. Like, that's because I'm productive. And so I had to refuse. And they ended up owing me money. And because then they didn't want to pay for the work I already did and the things I had already delivered. As an individual, you don't have a lot of power. So that was very stressful. As a new freelancer, this was my first project. So it was very, very tough. It was also with a big institute in Portugal, and it was with a big PI. So you burn a lot of bridges. So it was very hard for me to say no and walk away. I took a lot of shit. She treated me like shit. And my PIs in my PhD. So when I say she treated me like shit, it was like a whole different level of shit.
Wow.
At some point, this person told me I should never have spoken to you on the phone privately because you're a liar. And I was like, okay, now you're walking into like personal things, and this is not allowed. Like, yeah, I didn't record the conversations, but I didn't never lied. But of course, it's convenient. And
Yeah.
she did things like she would call me and say stuff and then book meetings and have two of her people show up for the meetings without telling me. And so then there were three of them against me. And then she was saying other things that she had said on the phone. So the person is completely crazy. That's the conclusion I take. But yeah, so she owed me money and it took me 4 months to get the money. And I had to email 8 directors of the institute. And yeah, I had to go to directions. I had to go because then the finance department of the institute was ghosting me. They just stopped replying to me. At some point, I went to a lawyer and they said, yeah, we can put them in court, but this is going to cost you more than the money. Like this is not worth it. Um, and so I had to say no. And at that point, after my first project, I was really ready to like never ever freelance again. Like I'm just so done with this. I hate people, which is something I say often. In the end, I had also sent a pitch to another institute when I got this project, and that project was actually starting and moving forward. And so I decided I'm going to give it a second chance. And I'm still now finishing that project. I'm getting new projects through a contact. I also got projects for another client. And so I've been having a couple of little projects, some big ones, some smaller ones, still very much starting, or I consider still very much starting, has been a year and a half. But I still consider like I've done literature reviews, I've done that little crazy project. I also do science communication, so I'm doing podcasts as well. Yeah, so what else have I done? Advisory boards, those are fun. Being in a room with doctors talking about diseases. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But it's actually just reporting what they say. So and you have to be obviously have scientific rigor and you have to understand the science behind what they are saying. But you can just read papers and understand it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now getting like one of the projects that I'll be doing now is more into regulatory writing, so study reports and these kind of things. So science, so medical writing goes into everything. It has a part which is more medcoms, which is like more patient outreach kind of documents, and it has a regulatory writing, which is more pharma and more rigorous kind of things. And I like them both. I also just like scientific writing, not necessarily medical stuff. But this is slightly more complicated to get because obviously, at least in Portugal, PIs don't have a lot of money to throw someone else to write their papers or their grants. You can just get students to do it for free.
Indeed.
And yeah, and then science communication is also something I really love, although it pays a bit less, I must say. But is just something I enjoy doing. So I've been just doing all of this, which I'm not even sure it's considered medical writing or science communication, or I don't know. I feel like I just do whatever projects come and look interesting and pay a
Mm.
very decent amount. So let's go.
So you are following joy and curiosity in a way as well. Even, as you said in the beginning, you're just going to do what makes life fun and interesting, and you are doing that now.
Yeah, for now, that's kind of sort of all the plan. There's not a lot of strategic
Yeah.
insight into it. Every time I consider, like, oh, I might just stop freelancing, there's a new project coming that looks
Hmm.
interesting. So I've been very fortunate with that. So yeah, I've not been very strategic about it. I mean, I did update my LinkedIn and I did create a website, but I don't necessarily advertise. I think maybe I should advertise myself more. I don't necessarily have a strategy for where I want to be in 5 years.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I want to be a freelancer in 5 years or if I want to, go and work in an institute or in a company. At the moment, I think I'm still like floating around and doing whatever projects feel interesting. Being a freelancer is very challenging. It's not easy. When you go online and you start seeing, there's two types of people who show up: people who complain a lot, and I tend to be more towards that, but I'm changing, and the people who say it's wonderful and it's the best thing ever.
And
And
the
I've,
truth is in the middle somewhere.
yeah, I think it depends a lot on the week. Some
Hmm.
weeks is the best thing ever,
Hmm.
other weeks it's hell.
Yeah.
Once you're dealing with finances and taxes and invoicing clients, and then waiting for the money to appear on your account by magic, and you
Mhm.
usually don't know when it's coming. And especially because of my first experience of the money never coming, I'm always very stressful to be like, is it coming in 2 days, in 2 weeks, in 2 months? You just don't know. That's stressful. I'm very privileged that my boyfriend earns enough money that we can make a living by.
Mhm.
So whatever I bring is basically extras. But that's a very fortunate situation, specifically now with the crisis that we are facing, that we have, our life made so that his salary is enough and then my salary is extra. So I pay for all the fun stuff with board games and traveling and books, and he has to pay the bills. So
That's
it's
fair.
wonderful. Yeah, yeah, it's fair for me. It's not so fair for him. Um, because if it was just me alone, I think it's very, very stressful because you never know if you're going to get money, when you're going to get money, when you're going to get clients. Everyone tells me it gets easier with time because you get more and more clients. So you can relax a bit and know that work will come through. So far, I've been lucky. Work has been coming through,
Mhm.
but I'm still not at the phase where I can be, or I feel I can be positive about it. Maybe I should be more positive, but being positive is something it's not natural for me. So I always think it's luck.
I hear
I don't know.
some academic kind of inspired imposter syndrome coming through, but
Yeah, it's always a little bit there, but I mean, so far I'm following the fun. There's not a lot of strategy behind.
I
Um,
mean, it does almost feel like it was serendipity that you just saw this event and then
yeah,
you entered, like you got in the room, but in the end, you could have seen this event and not signed up. You could have been in the room and not talk to anybody and not introduce yourself and not get any context to that, right? So it's in the end your decisions, maybe not fully conscious, but in the end it's your decisions and your doing that you are in this position. And I'm sure that also the work coming through is not just because it's kind of landing in your lap by magic. It's because you are doing a good job. And, maybe there's word of mouth and LinkedIn, you are being very consistent there. I'm always like, I always tell to myself, I need to do something about my LinkedIn. Then I just go and I see your posts that are super regular and they're, always there in two languages, in Portuguese and in
yeah.
English. And I'm like, okay, this is an example that I need to look up to.
Well, I just book time for it and I schedule most of my posts. So that's why they are regular because one day I just sit down and I do three of them, and
Mm-hmm.
then I schedule one a week and then I have 3 weeks sorted, right? I'm not there clicking the button on purpose
Every week, yeah.
every week. Although I need to schedule more because now work is going to pick up a bit and I need to buy myself a bit more time. But yeah, I think definitely that helps. And I have clients who are returning for a second
Mm-hmm.
project. So I guess
I
that's
guess it's
because
not
they're
just luck.
happy. Yeah, I know, but it's just the way I think my brain works. I'm not very positive. So I think being a freelancer, it's easier if you're an optimist, right? Because you just
Mhm.
believe it's going to work and you believe the money will come through. And I'm not that person. So it goes against all my inputs and my, I don't know, my way of thinking being a freelancer. So I don't know why I'm doing this.
But
I feel
I
like I
think,
chose the worst thing for me, but I'm sticking with it because I'm actually growing a lot. I'm a whole
yeah.
completely different person now. I'm more optimistic. I have flexibility. Look, you have a lot of flexibility in science. That's something I always loved in the lab and I always used it. And I would stay often to work from home because I'm much more productive from home.
Hmm.
And I'm one of the weirdos that I'm more productive if I'm locked in my office and working. I cannot go to a coffee shop. I cannot work in a public space or an open office or, oh my God, that's are terrible for me.
Yeah.
And I'm much better and have much more energy if I'm at home and see nobody.
Mm.
I'm weird. Um,
No, I get it. I think open plan offices, open spaces are like my personal hell in a way,
yeah, I mean, for work, yes, I love talking to people and connecting to people, but if I have
for
work to do,
focused work. Yeah.
there's not a chance I'm going to be productive there. But I like working with people. So like the podcast, I go there and I interview people and it's fun. But then I need to lock myself and edit and getting things done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think being a freelancer is easier if you're optimistic. It is complicated managing everything because you're also managing expectations. The good part about the relationship with a client is usually it's not your supervisor, so it's it's shorter term, right? You usually don't have, which is good and bad, but you usually don't have a 4-year project.
Hmm.
You're lucky if you have a 4-month project, but at least you know that that relationship is 4 months, you know. And it's not so much power driven in the sense that yes, they can terminate the contract, but so can you. You
Mm.
can also say, okay, this is done. I don't care.
Much more balanced and
Yeah,
even relationship. Yeah.
exactly. So although it's not easy, but you can do it. I do have a lot more flexibility in my days most of the time because I have the podcast, which I have interviews scheduled, and then for some other projects I might have a meeting or another, but the rest of the time is for me to deal with as I want.
Hmm.
So that's why I can be recording these in the middle of a work day. I mean, no one cares. I'll just
Yeah.
finish later today. This is very good for me because of the way I want to live my life.
Mm.
My grandparents are old and COVID and my years in Geneva really affected them in the sense that I see them declining very fast. And so I try to have lunch with them every 2 to 3 weeks. So actually, I'm going to have lunch with them after our conversation. You know, it's cool. You get to be present for people in a different way. So when someone needs to go to a medical appointment and they need a driver, or like my grandparents, they can't go alone anymore because they
Mhm.
cannot really understand what the doctors are saying. If no one else can go, I can manage to
Yeah.
go. Like, and it's silly stuff like vet appointments. I can just book the vet appointments and make my schedule around them.
Yeah.
It's all of these tiny things, or like, oh, there's this cool event at 3 p.m., but I really want to go, and I can just go. Of course, sometimes it does mean you have to work on a Saturday or you have to work an evening, but you get to sort of manage your work around.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is important right now.
I do think that I mean, it is very hard, but the flexibility is unparalleled in the fact that, like, on my side, for example, that I could choose to, I mean, again, it's a privileged position to
Yeah.
be in, but I could choose to stay with my son, for example, for a bit longer, and I could kind of work around his schedule and in the little cracks of the day that he sleeps or something. I did appreciate it so much, and I do feel like it is much easier, as you mentioned, to be employed and to just only wear one hat, to have a fixed contract that you don't need to worry about where is the next invoice is going to come from, where's the next money going to come from. But at the same time, I do feel like once you tried it, it kind of makes you unemployable for life because you kind of cannot go back to the same. Maybe sometimes, I mean, it's best if you go for employment and you have the structure. But at this point, I cannot imagine not having the flexibility, especially like, yeah, when you have animals, when you have kids, little kids, or when you have grandparents or parents who are getting older and need you more often, need your help. It is so good that you can be there for them. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think, as you're saying, I'm not sure it makes you unemployable, but I think you definitely are more picky. So
Mhm.
sometimes I still apply for what we call in-house jobs, so jobs at companies like full time, or even sometimes not completely 40 hours full time. But the other problem in Portugal that not sure how it is there, but At least in Switzerland, it's very frequent to have like 80% contracts or 70% contracts. In Portugal, we have part-time, so 50% or full-time. Like those like we don't break it as much. And for me, it would be like amazing to have like a 70% contract where I'll just have like 1 day a week to do my own things. Or have a full, that's also something I looked into this year, like have a part-time, like contract part-time 20 hours and then the other 20 hours work as a freelance. Although now I'm going to have 40 hours of freelance work for the next few months, which is great. It's a good position to be in. But I was looking yesterday at my calendar and I was like, oh, there goes my me time. But it's just these 2 months. And then probably I'll have a month where I have less work. So you have to manage these sort of like in academia where you have that time where you have to crack one with experiments. So you have no life for 2 months. But yeah, I do think it makes you more picky when choosing a job. So I do apply for some in-house jobs and I had a couple of interviews. And in one of them, they were just saying, yeah, we expect you to be, it's remote from home, but you need to be in the computer from 9 to 6. And I'm like, yeah, what if I don't have enough work a day or I have, extra work? Oh, we don't pay for extra hours. If you don't have enough work, you still are required to be in the computer from 9 to 6. We will be recording your times. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. Like, I don't need babysitting. I'm an adult. Either you trust me to do the work or you don't. I don't know. I guess most companies are not like that. This company was like that. And I immediately went like, oh no, that's not how I work. It is rare that I do not put in the hours, but sometimes I do not put in the hours, and that's fine. I'll put in the hours next week. Or maybe sometimes I think I'm going to take longer to do something and then I'm faster. But that doesn't mean I deserve less money just because I was more productive.
And that doesn't mean that you just need to stare at your screen for all these hours just because.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, understandable. That's in a way, and also the fact that you mentioned before the sort of imposter syndrome and that it's all just luck, and that I wanted to also ask you, how do you think your academic background affected the way you show up in a freelancer position, in a sense that what was good and what kind of transferable skills, what good parts could you bring out of academic training, academia, into your freelancing? And what do you think is holding you back that is kind of maybe conditioning from academia?
I think definitely what holds me back is me. It's not academia. It's definitely the need to advertise more, to sell yourself more. I am sort of good in networking. Like I go to seminars and I sometimes put in my LinkedIn for people to connect. And if I go to an in-person event, I'm going to talk to probably a lot of people because I like talking. And I'm not that shy. But then when it comes to sending pitches to people and be like, here, I'm looking for work. Oh, yeah, I need to do that. But I've been lucky that every time I'm like ready to do that, a client comes, oh, I need your work, and so I'm like, oh, yeah, then I cannot send a pitch. People are looking for me. But yeah, this is something I definitely need to work on better to be more proactive looking, because this is good. And even if clients don't pick you up, at least they know your name and it's word of mouth and they might need you in 6 months or in a year. But I'm not sure this comes from academia. I think this is also personality. Some people are very good at doing this. I don't really like that. I don't know. It feels like I'm begging for work, which feels weird. Even though that's not at all what you're doing. What you're doing is, I'm here to solve problems. If you have these problems, I can solve them. I understand the logic behind it. It just, I need to get ready to do that. And I feel I'm not yet ready to do that. So that's definitely something that's holding me back. And they're about transferable skills. When I was leaving academia, I thought, I don't know how to do anything else. I know how to pipette, but I don't want to pipette. I know how to analyze data, but I don't want to analyze data. I know how to spend 10 hours in a microscope. I don't want to spend 10 hours in a microscope. But there's a lot of things I did love to do, which is projects, writing projects. But that's a hard skill. And I didn't really value transferable skills. And once you go out into all of these resources, they'll talk you a lot about your transferable skills. And some of them, sometimes you feel a bit like, oh, that's not sure about that. I'm not sure about the other thing. But it's true that once you start, you realize that indeed you have these skills. So for me, definitely organization. I mean, as you even mentioned that during my PhD, I felt like it looks like I had all my shit together. I mean, I have a motto, I do not like to Google. and I use Google Calendar for everything. Everything, like cooking is in my Google Calendar, going grocery shopping is in my Google Calendar, because or else I'll forget about it. Everything goes on my calendar.
Yeah.
And that organization is critical once you're struggling different projects, like in academia, right? You have this experiment, and that's part of the project, and that part of the project. And sometimes you're working multiple projects for multiple collaborations. It's kind of the same here. I have that project, and this client, and that client. And you have to make it all work in your calendar. So that definitely the organization is there. It's just a different way of organizing things, but it is there. The way you adapt to the unforeseeable circumstances is there, right? Oh, your experiment didn't work. And here is a client needs me last minute. Am I going to take it or not? Or with the podcast, I don't know how it is with yours, but with mine, a lot of people cancel last minute. A lot of these people are doctors, they are clinicians. And some of them are like, oh, my surgery is complicating. I cannot talk to you. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's someone on the table. Like, do not worry about talking to me about your science. Like it's very secondary.
Yeah.
It's not. And obviously, like I'm wasting time that I'm not getting paid for if I go there and leave without an interview, then this time is not paid. But at a certain time, and maybe here's something I'm missing again, I should be more straightforward, be like, no, I wasted these hours. But for me, it's very hard to say to a scientist that is giving me an interview, or even to a doctor, right? They are giving me an interview in their free time in a way for a podcast. Okay, the institute is paying me, but the person is not directly getting paid. And I'm saying, no, look, you have to give me your time. But yeah, I think the way we adapt to the circumstances is there. So I always take my tablet and I always have stuff that I can work on meanwhile. So this is definitely something you learn to adapt. You learn how you can get around things. And the other, even yesterday, I was having a call with a client, and they were a bit worried that the hours weren't enough, and I might need more hours. And I told them like, look, they are researchers, and I told them like, I've worked research. I know that sometimes 40 hours aren't enough, and you know that it's okay if this week I put in more hours. I'll compensate next week or in 2 weeks. We know those cycles. We know that sometimes you just have to crunch on. And yes, you're going to be tired. You're going to be tired, and you're working extra time, and it's frustrating because it's like, oh, I left the lab so I don't have to work until midnight, and here I am working until midnight. And when I was working in the lab, at least I was working for myself. Here I'm not working for myself. I am, but I'm not, right? The project isn't mine. But sometimes you just have to do it. And so that flexibility, that way that you can adapt, that's there. That's there in academia, that's there in the lab, and that's there in freelancing, but that's also there in different, I think, in any job. My boyfriend, he works as a consultant. He has that, like clients call and they need everything. And you have to see what's urgent, what's not urgent, what you can do, what you can't do. There's deadlines. So there's a lot of time where he's working extra time because the deadline is coming. So that flexibility, that organization that you learn in the lab by managing your own time, I think that's great. I think if you have someone or a job where people always manage your time and they tell you from 2 to 3 you do this, from 3 to 4 you do that, if all of a sudden you have to manage your own work, you can't.
Yeah.
But that's not most places in academia, right? Most places you
Yeah.
manage, that you learn, and you learn about yourself too. You know what works for you. And I think that's also something very important in any job, but I think as a freelancer it's particularly important to know when you're most productive, to book your most important tasks. So I see this like with podcast editing. I can edit if I'm tired. It's just looking at the sound waves, and just it's focused work, but it doesn't really require my entire brain. Well, if I'm writing a paper, I do need my entire brain to be engaged in that. And so that I try to work more in the morning because I'm more fresh. Some people are more evening people, and so you need to know that about yourself. So definitely there's a lot of transferable skills there that are important. I think another skill that does help me, it was one of the reasons why I left academia, is people managing, and the politics that you were mentioning. When you're managing clients, it's not so different, right? Because you're managing their expectations. You have to be nice, but not too nice that they step on you. So you also have to input your boundaries. So it's I think sometimes very not political, but it's managing people, it's managing relationships. And I've learned a lot in my PhD because I had two supervisors and two labs. And so, and I had a different relationship with everyone. And so you manage to adapt to different people, to different colleagues, to different ways of working with also people who are not organized, which are, for me, the worst people to work with. Because I am obsessed with organization. I optimize everything in my life because time is the most important thing that I have. And this also comes from not knowing how long you have in your life, that you value every second of your day. And so for me, like doing stuff as grocery shopping, I optimize my list so that I know where I'm going into the supermarket and it's optimized by corridors so that I don't have to go back. I only move forward. This is the point of obsession that I have, which is not healthy. That's a transferable skill as well, that you can manage your time, you can manage relationships with people, you can adapt to whatever, experiment failed or the client like last minute pulled out the project. This happens. And then there's other things that are harder to manage, which are a bit worse than academia, which for me is the insecurity of the job, right? I think academia, we always say it's unstable because you don't know if you're going to get a fellowship and if you're going to get a project. But at least once you get the fellowship, you know the money's coming. And it goes there. For 4 years, you have that money. For 2 years, you have that money. As a freelance, I have like 2 months, 4 months. It's much more stressful in that sense.
Yeah,
So I think that's where the privilege really comes in of having someone else that you can rely on.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to delay your lunch with your grandparents much further, but I do have like one or two
Yeah, it's okay.
final questions, final points. So you mentioned
The cat is also sleeping in my lap, so I can't get up. Those
you
are the
cannot
rules.
move. I
Yeah,
see.
those are the rules.
We're not making them, so yeah. You mentioned the flexibility and then also the boundaries that are kind of in academia, you had to learn how to do it, and then it's a transferable skill that you are now using in your freelance career. I mean, it's probably also in part my personality. And I always felt like, yeah, there is this advertised flexibility in academia, but it's so difficult to actually be flexible because, yeah, you know, you can kind of manage your time, and maybe if you do need to leave at some point for like a bank appointment or a medical appointment or whatever, you can. But it's almost, yeah, I mean, there is an unspoken requirement or expectation that you're going to work, I don't know, 12, 14 hours a day, whatever, 80 hours weeks. I don't know. The same with boundaries, like you have to have them, but I think with some specific people, it's also very, very difficult because they don't appreciate having students or people underneath them that have boundaries. And I mean, knowing you, probably you you are not your experience was different, but did you have to kind of relearn this as you started your freelance career? Did you have to sort of be like, okay, this is what I did in academia, this didn't work, now I'm going to do it this way?
I think in academia, I learned to input boundaries. I'm very strict with myself, and that means I'm also sometimes very strict with others. I was lucky that even though with my PhD supervisors, things weren't easy, and at the time, really not easy. At some points, I was going crazy. There was always, looking back, there was always respect. They were never, ever disrespectful to me. They never treated me necessarily like shit. Sometimes you feel like shit, but it's not because the other person is treating you like shit. It's the way you're, reacting to it, the way you're interpreting that. It's not real. They're not treating you like shit. They're treating as they treat everyone. But at least they were never disrespectful to me. In my postdoc, I had a different problem where I felt more disrespected. And it was very hard for me to put boundaries in because I was away from home, so I had no other network to rely on. But at some point, you have to put in those boundaries. It's either you or them, and you have to choose yourself. And that therapy did help. And also, therapy did realize that for me to realize that sometimes they are not saying it in a disrespectful manner, you are seeing it like that. It's not that you are the problem, but sometimes the problem is the relationship there. It's already stranded. Um, and also sometimes supervisors, because they are too used to having all of these power they think they have there. Of course, these are not all supervisors, but they think they can pinpoint or comment on other aspects of your life. So I had my supervisors commenting on my relationship with my boyfriend. And I'm like, this is not anything of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because they said like, oh, you're just being more unproductive because you're sad. And I had a fight with my postdoc supervisor where they were saying I was depressed. And I was, because they knew I was having therapy. And again, I'm very conscious of my health. So then I went to my therapist and I said, do you think I'm depressed? And he's like, no, you're not. Like you show no signs of clinical depression. So then I went to my supervisor and I told him like, I see a professional who, is equipped to giving these diagnoses. And he says, I'm not. And my supervisor said, you are, trust me, I know you. And I'm like, first, I'm not, but I'm confident enough to know that I'm not.
Yeah.
Someone else might not have that confidence. This can really be damaging for those people.
Yeah.
Someone who might actually be depressed should not have a finger pointed at them to say you're depressed and that's your fault and that's on you and that's why you're a bad professional. The conversation should be, is everything okay? How can I help?
Mm-hmm.
And that I felt is very disrespectful, and I felt like it's damaging, and so I felt that I had to put those boundaries, and I failed a bit at putting them because I was there and I was alone and everything got mixed together. As a freelancer, I thought people are coming to me as a professional, so they're going to respect me as a professional, right? They're not going to think they're my supervisors. They're not going to think they have any say in how I live my life, because this is now a professional relationship. But maybe it was because of my first clients that they were academics, but this happened again. And I was getting phone calls and emails and text messages, off hours, with things that were not my tasks. So another thing when you're a freelancer is you have your assigned tasks or your assigned deliverables. Sometimes people ask you for, oh, can you also do this something else? Okay, sure, I can also do that. It's another email or it's another, PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it takes me half an hour. I'll do that for you for free. But then this piles up and people start asking more and more and more. And at a certain time, you're doing double of the job for the same amount of money. And at a certain point, I was saying, like, no, I won't do this because it's not in my tasks, in my contract. And once you start putting in those boundaries, some people respect that. And I had a client who asked me if I could just simply do the same report in two different languages, which is not the same report because it's not, if it is putting on Google Translate and translate, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a medical report. So these are medical terms. So these are things that need to be properly checked. I cannot just Google Translate everything.
Yeah.
And so I said, it's not the same report twice. I mean, it's the same report twice. It's not just a translation. And there are medical professionals, medical writers who only do translations. There are translational professionals who do translations. I'm not. I'm fluent in both languages. I can write in both languages, but it's two different documents. So you have to pay me. I'm not saying the double amount of work, double amount of money, but I need extra money. And most importantly for me was extra time because this was a 10-day period. And in 10 days, I could do one report, but I couldn't do two reports.
Yeah.
And I say that, and the client respected, said, yeah, in the contract it says one, so you can do one because we can't pay you more.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine. They respected that boundary. There was a contract, the contract said one, I did one, and that was it. They still try to see, and this was something I learned from other friends who work in sales, clients always try to get more from you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your job to make sure they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate this perspective because it looks like we are always in a fight with the client. But I do realize that happens, right? The client is like, oh, I also need to report in a different language. I'll see if she can do it. I don't think they took it as a bad thing that I said no. They just tried in case I could do it, Of course, if I could do it, it was better for them because they were not the ones doing it. But you have to establish your boundaries. Can I do it? Should I do it?
Yeah.
With my first big project, I had to start putting in a lot of boundaries because it was getting out of control. It was sort of like a 20-hour project. It was taking me 37 hours every week. So it was like every week, and it was a lot of focus groups with doctors, and I had groups with people from the States and from Australia at the same time. So this means it's terrible for everyone. And then I had groups at like 8 a.m. for me and groups at 9 p.m. And my schedule was a mess.
Wow.
So I had to start putting in boundaries. And of course, the boundaries were not for the doctors who live in those areas because that I cannot change. The boundaries was if I'm working from 8 a.m. this day, I'm not working until 9 p.m. So then person who was managing the project did not like me putting boundaries and did not like me starting to say, I'm not doing this task because it's not in our contract. I can do this task for X amount of money, but I won't do it for free. Again, small tasks, an email or, a PowerPoint presentation, that's fine. But once you're talking about big projects with a lot of people involved and a lot of Excel spreadsheets and a lot of things to write and a lot of emails to send, if you're doing more and more, you need to get paid for that amount of time. And so I started putting those boundaries and you start to have backlash from people. And I think the pattern, as you were saying, I think PIs and big PIs are not used to having these people saying no to them. They're used to having students saying, yes, please, of course I'll do it. And so as a PhD student, and if you talk to my supervisors, they will say I was never like that. They always heard no from me a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, in my PhD defense, PIs have like 5 minutes in the end to say nice words about you. And what I heard is, well, for the last few months, Sónia was our supervisor. And this was because I had 6 weeks to write my thesis. So they got a table. This is when you're going to get one chapter. This is how much time you have to review the chapter. I won't accept any revisions after this date. There was a table, and they got the table,
Wow.
and they complied with it. I
This is
made them both
amazing.
complied with it.
This is amazing.
I mean, if I don't fail, they couldn't fail. And they
Yeah.
didn't fail. They knew, because again, there was that respect there. They didn't like that I did that. I'm sure they hated me at that point because, who is this kid who's now controlling my schedule? But they respected the work I've put in to get to that point.
Yeah.
And they knew that if I won't fail my deadline, so won't they, you know. And I was expecting as a freelancer to have that respect from clients. Some of them do. Some of them are amazing. Sometimes you get these that are not so good. Sometimes you get these people, and I'm not sure it's because they are PIs or not. I mean, because I have PIs who are great and I have PIs who aren't great, you know. But the boundary is a bit more complicated, and you can try to establish it. But then, as I said, in this big project, it came to a point of renewal where I said, this is the conditions. And they're like, we want to pay you less. And I'm like, no. I mean, I'm already dealing with all of this shit for this amount of money, which I also already consider is bad. I'm not decreasing the amount of money because I'm sure you won't decrease the amount of shit, you
Yeah.
know? So you have to put
Mhm.
in those boundaries. And if you can't, or if the boundary is not established both, between both people, then it's better just to terminate that relationship. And this is where I think freelancer is much better than academia, because as a PhD, for me to terminate that relationship would mean to lose my degree,
Yeah.
right? And in Portugal, if you're funded by the state, you have to give the money back to the state. So I'd actually be owing my salaries back. So it was not something I could afford to do. Uh, as a postdoc, I could have done it. I could have just quit my contract, but I don't think I was ready for that. Uh, but now I'm learning to quit more things. It's a process and I'm learning. So far, I've only had to quit once, that first project. You always have to be respectful, but you have to establish the boundaries. And definitely that's something I think it's harder and easier as a freelancer, because you shouldn't have to establish them. They should be, two professionals. And once you say a no, it's a no, and there's respect between the people.
But also
In
you're
some,
dealing with people.
yeah, and in some ways it is easier. Some people do see you as a professional and do respect you that. Other people, they will still always see you as a kid who works for them and not with them. I think that's the biggest difference. So it does depend a lot on the people, but I feel more empowered to put boundaries because, yeah, I mean, worst case, I don't get the money, but I also don't do the work, right? And at least I don't have to put up with that shit, and I don't lose a degree and I don't owe money to the Portuguese state.
Yeah.
I don't get money, but at least,
At least
there's
you
not
don't
this.
have to pay all your salaries back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, I probably won't go to those clients to ask for a testimonial of my work.
Yeah.
And they may say shit to me about to other people, but you know what? That's just something I have to deal with. There's still more clients who will say nice things,
Of
hopefully.
course.
And you also have to choose the relationships. I think in your life, not just in academia or in your job, you have to choose the relationships you want to nurture. So I don't think that's different. I think it's just a different challenge because there's money involved, but in academia, there's always money involved. So I think also personality wise, I was always very assertive in my life. So saying no, it's my standard. It's often that I say no, more rare that I say yes. I'm always a no first. Convince me otherwise.
Yeah,
So it's also a personality thing.
of
And I
course.
think for me that part was easier. In my PhD was hard, in my postdoc was hard because of the imbalance of power, and also because you need reference letters. As long as you're trapped in academia, you need reference letters. You need those people to vouch for you, and then you're stuck with them. As a freelancer, I mean, it's good that clients love you and come back. It's good to have testimonials of clients who say, yes, she's a great professional. We love working with her. But I mean, I always say, if I don't have them, that's also fine. I can always look for a job elsewhere. I'm doing this and I love doing this and I love managing my days and doing completely different projects. And, I haven't repeat a project twice or the same output twice. So I'm learning and has been such a learning curve, both professional but also personal, wearing these multiple hats of having to negotiate your contracts, having to deal with invoicing. I now understand taxes. Ugh. I don't like them, but I understand them.
Who would have thought, yeah, at the beginning, because it is such a learning curve, as you said. Like there is so many things you have to do by yourself that you don't expect sort of at the beginning, and then you learn, and then it becomes kind of, oh, okay, I'm doing that.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with that is always like, well, I did cryo-EM where they give you a microscope of, I don't know, 3 or 4 millions in your hands and be like, do it. And I've done it. So like if I've learned 107 steps of a protocol, which is a nightmare, but when I read the paper, it's 107 steps, the protocol, I thought I'm never in my life going to be able to do that. And I did it. So you know what? Taxes, like everyone can learn taxes. It's a pain and it's a whole different level of nightmare, but you can learn it. You can learn anything.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit with that mind frame that I also see freelancing. Like I can learn. I'm very honest with clients, like, oh, I don't have experience in this type of output, but I'll learn. I can learn. This is my background. This is what I have experience with. I'll put in the work and I'll learn that as well. And I think if you're honest, people also value that. And, I think you have to establish that trust relationship. And I'm learning a lot about myself as well. I'm learning a lot about how to manage my time with more flexibility, being more kind to myself as well. This is something that's definitely not natural for me. But being more kind in saying, you know what, today I'll have a 2 hour talk with Xenia and then I'll have a 2 hour lunch with my grandparents. And that's fine. I'll work in the afternoon, probably until the evening, but
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. No, it's fine. I don't, you see, the thing is, I'll probably work more tonight and I'll work tomorrow night as well. But that's fine because those are also the days that my boyfriend goes to the office, so he comes home later. So I end up working late anyway, regardless of if I'm having fun during my day or not. So might as well book the fun for those days.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I have no meetings, I have nothing. So that's also something I've learned, which is putting all the meetings in specific days and then leaving days without any meetings so that I can focus. And I'll probably just spend the day in my pajama and it's going to be a storm. So I'll be locked at home in my pajama and I'll just crack on with work. And that flexibility and knowing that I have that skill, and I think it's amazing and it's very empowering. That's me choosing me over an employer.
Sure. Which is something that, yeah, I mean, obviously, as you say, it is a privilege to
Yeah.
do. We sometimes don't have that choice, but it is a good position to be in when you can then choose you and choose fun and, schedule fun, schedule time with your loved ones, and you don't need to worry about that you're, missing something or you're going to be seen a certain way if you take a day off or something, by your employer. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
definitely that's something. I mean, I think it's and I like to acknowledge how privileged I am because once you start to realize, and I said during COVID time, I had a 2 bedroom apartment, so I had an office because I had calls with colleagues who were doing lab meetings, and you can see their bed in the background because that's the room, right? There's the room where you work and when you leave, and the room where you're sleeping, and I was privileged to have a different house setting. I was privileged to have green in my doorstep. I was privileged to have a boyfriend who was at home and so was cooking for me. I'm privileged to have a boyfriend who has a contract. And so he makes sure the bills are paid and I make sure the rest is sorted. So, this is a privileged position that I recognize not everyone has. Having the chance to just go and have lunch with my grandparents is a choice that not everyone has. I mean, when I was in Geneva, I didn't have that choice. And so, like, I think knowing what's important for you and fighting a bit to have that life. And I think in academia there's always like, this is the job you have to do, this is how you have to do it, you have to put in the extra hours, you have to do this and you have to do that. And that's not necessarily true, and that's not the way you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way you have to live your life. There are many ways to live your life, and some people are happy doing that. And I'm happy putting in the hours when I need to. But the thing is, when I need to, I'm happy to not need to do it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a matter of recognizing what you need in your life and then working towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing wrong if what you need is a nature, a cell, a science, or to be a professor. If that's what makes you happy, then go for it.
I think it's a lot about discernment and like self-reflection, self-awareness,
Mm.
knowing yourself. Because I mean, I do feel like in academia, it's often the case that you have sort of the, what's it called, the blinkers, or the what
Yeah.
horses have, that you kind of are put in one track and you have to follow this one track, this one definition of success, this one single identity. And also you are bombarded by these expectations that this is how you should do, that you should be working long hours, you should be working weekends, you cannot be successful, quote unquote, without putting more than 40 hours or however many you have in your contract. And often it's difficult to kind of filter that out and separate the way or what you want and the way you want to live your life from this outside voices and noise and expectations. So it is amazing that you had that clarity, and it's so important what you said, that you need to realize what is in alignment with how you want to live, how you want to feel, with your values, because otherwise you're just going to follow this single track and be unhappy all throughout that time.
Yeah, I think something that I have not mentioned here is you have to grieve that person. Academia
Mm-hmm.
becomes who you are, and you lose your identity when you lose academia. And that took grieving, and it takes grieving to lose the dream, even if it's not your dream at that time, it was the dream of your previous you.
At some point, yeah.
And yeah, I also think academia is a bit like a cult. What you were just saying, right?
Yeah,
That they put you in this track and they brainwash you. But the
in a
thing is, you
sense.
have to see, they put you in this track when you're 20. They are taking like kids and brainwashing
Mm-hmm.
uh, kids, like this is what you need to do. And if you do this, you will be successful. But that's not true. There's not enough
Mm-hmm.
jobs for everyone. We cannot just all publish Nature, Cell Science, and be PIs and have all the money in the world. There's
Yeah.
not ERCs for everyone. Not everyone has an ERC idea, and that's fine. There's a lot of good science who is not an ERC idea. But try to get a job in Portugal without bringing an ERC.
Mm-hmm.
Institutes don't even look at you if you don't have an ERC to bring.
Yeah.
That's just, it's crazy right now. And I think if you want that, go for it and fight for it. But it's okay if it's not what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of opportunities out there. There's plenty of resources out there. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. But yes, it's a grieving period. And yes, it's not going to be easy. And again, I was very privileged to be able to do it. You also acknowledge your privilege. It's also important to acknowledge not everyone has that privilege.
Yeah.
But most of my friends now, moving back home, I think a big, I would say more than 70% of my friends right now, they didn't even go to college. They have jobs and they make a living, and they do normal jobs. They are city employers. One of them owns a funeral house. You know, the other designs websites. He doesn't even have a college degree. He doesn't need a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of very happy people with their lives. But yeah, I mean, it's good to acknowledge that we have privilege that allows us to do these choices.
Yeah.
But even if you don't have privilege, it's okay. And it's okay if you have to work in a supermarket until you figure out what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if all supermarkets close, we are screwed because it's not
Yeah.
our PhDs who will, make us make flour and
Yeah.
package flour. So,
Exactly.
so yeah, I think it's an adventure and definitely a lot of reflection and understanding who you are and what you need in your life, and understanding that what what you need in your life and who you are changes over time,
Yeah.
and that's okay. That's supposed to change over time.
Yeah. That is a big one as well. And you mentioned grieving. Would you say that this process has been sort of has come to a conclusion for you, or is it coming and going in waves?
I think most of the process is done. I don't look back, and so now I often go to the institute I was to visit friends. And so I see the labs that I was, and part of me looks and be like, oh, I kind of, happy times. I
Mm-hmm.
also like you tend to forget the not happy times. And I still go and I still visit my PhD supervisors and now have a very different relationship with both of them, which is kind of curious, because now we talk as more like colleagues, as more like, grown-ups. But I think it was needed that I left and I returned to now be seen as a grown-up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also feel like I go into a room with a different approach, and that also makes people react to you differently.
Mm-hmm.
I now try to enter rooms being a grown-up, and then people react to you differently. But I go to institutes and I see the labs, and a part of me goes like, oh yeah, happy times. And sometimes, yeah, I would miss the pipette, but then I remember, no, I actually wouldn't, because that means I have to pipette at this time, and then it goes to the PCR machine, and then I have to pipette the gel, and then I have all of these steps, which no, I do not miss it. And I do not miss the data analysis, and I do not miss the failed experiments.
Yeah.
I do sometimes miss the boring days. I miss picking up bacteria colonies or plant colonies in the flow hood the entire day, or splitting cells and listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
The brain dead days where you just do random things in the lab, but you don't actually use a brain. These days I have less now. And so sometimes I do miss that, but I do not miss the lab, and I don't miss academia. I don't miss, in fact, I think the fact that I still go to institutes and I still deal with clients that are in academia, it just actually reinforces that, yeah, I
Mm.
don't want to deal with this. And sometimes they are complaining, and I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, I support you, I hear you. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying, yes, I'm so glad I left that.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, there are good things, and there's amazing people in academia, there is amazing labs, and there is very generous people. Um, but it's just the system is not very caring and very generous.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be part of a system that doesn't represent my values, but I'm still here to help, the people who are there. And I have friends who are finishing their PhDs or trying to finish their PhDs, and I'm always like, I know it's a different kind of hell. I know it's very specific period in your life, and yeah, and but it's acknowledging the privilege you have. It's acknowledging that isn't easy. It wasn't easy, and it's not going to be easy. But yeah, I think most of the grieving period is over, and
Mm.
I feel much more comfortable now with my choice maybe that I felt in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It does help that I'm making a bit of money, so I'm like, yes, I can do something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think also something I didn't talk here might be useful. I think getting the first job out of academia is the most important thing, because your CV is fully academic. And so getting something that is not academia is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get that first one, it's relatively easier. I'm not the first person to say this, and I'm not a good example because, well, my first thing is being a freelancer. So it's kind of still not a proper job, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. But the truth is, I was not getting any interviews. And as soon as I put freelancer there, I started to get interviews.
Mm-hmm.
In real life, it changes very little. But then because there's freelancing, that means people are paying me for my services. That means someone is willing to pay me to do something else than pipetting in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
It makes other people evaluating, oh, maybe she does something else. Maybe she's capable of doing something else. As a freelancer, something I did, so I updated my LinkedIn, I created a website, and I created a portfolio of things that my clients can go and they can see, and it's on my website. You can go and you can see what kind of outputs you put.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are from academic life, and that's because what I do now for clients is usually protected by clients and copyrights for clients and privacy agreements. So I cannot just take, something I give to a client and put it out there,
Mm-hmm.
right? The podcast I can because it's a public output. The idea is that people actually listen to
Listen
it.
to it, yeah.
But if there is, like, especially in regulatory pharma, all of these are protected things. There are drugs for companies, there are reports from patients, like all of these things, they are protected, so I cannot put them there. But you can see, like, the papers I've written, usually not for clients. The papers are written with my name because the clients, they protect the papers. And so, but you do a portfolio and you show people what you can do. And I think that's obviously very important for medical writing, but probably for other companies as well, having a sample of what you can do could make a difference when in your application to show them that you have experience doing something else. And I know it's very hard when you're in academia, but and I have mixed feelings about volunteering because it's more free work. But it definitely helped me. I did some volunteering for a podcast, which I'm still involved with, which is Preprints in Motion, and I still involved with production of that. But I do that voluntarily. But it gave me the experience to when I approach the client to say I can do a podcast, that I'm paid to do a podcast because I already knew how to do it, right? Um, so I also like volunteered with a Bio, which is an association for preprints. And through there, I've met and had contact with a lot of editors. And so then when I was looking for editing positions, I knew who I could contact to talk to people. And I have some other outputs that I wrote there voluntarily, like a blog post and all of this. I was invited to do, I did it. And now it's part of my portfolio. So all of these other things that you can do a bit for free on the side, first, they are a good break from your traditional lab work. So they give you a bit of breathing air, but also they can give you a bit of a different portfolio. Of course, be careful with how much you volunteer because then
It's
you're
free
still
work.
doing
Yeah.
free work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still doing free work.
Yeah.
So right now I still have 2 volunteer initiatives that I'm involved with that I do voluntarily on my own time, but that's when I have 3 hours a week to volunteer projects. And then if I get another volunteer project, people, oh, can you do this voluntarily? I'm like, do I have time in these 3 hours or not? And that's how I sorted. Look, I still want to be involved in volunteering. I still want to give back to the communities that helped me, but I need to put in a fixed amount of time. And obviously, when my calendar gets more confused and more messy, that's the 3 hours that I get free because I can, right? Um, but for me, it's important to give back to the community. It's important to be there for people who need these kind of advices because I also needed to hear them from different people, to be involved in volunteering, to try to still change academia. And if you see my LinkedIn is a lot about like peer review problems and publishing problems, and because these things that I'm really passionate about. And these are things that I do in my free time. So I have my hours of volunteer work. So I would say like try to get different outputs, different portfolios, different things you can do, but just be mindful of your time and putting yourself first.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think one last thing that I want to ask you, because again, being mindful of the time, you mentioned your friends that are about to finish the PhD and maybe looking back at yourself in their shoes or somewhere in the middle of your PhD, having had all these experiences, what would you say to a person in that position? Maybe, confused, maybe lost, maybe wondering if there is a different way, contemplating the next steps, considering what else they can do, being lost and thinking like, I can only pipette, I don't have any other experience. Maybe, more encouragement and advice from you.
That's a very hard one. I think there's a lot of things. I think the first one is all feelings are normal and acceptable at that stage of your life. You can feel whatever and you can feel very mixed things. You can feel very happy with your project and very, very frustrated. And all feelings are valid. Feelings do not have to be are not valid, but it is very natural that you feel lost. It's very natural that you feel frustrated. It is very natural that you do not see the light at the end of the tunnel to a point where you don't think the light is there, but the light is there and the light will appear at some point. You just have sometimes to keep going forward. Sometimes there's no light yet, there's no hope yet, and you just have to go one more day and one more day and one more day. Now, this is not to say if you do feel like you need mental health help, please look for it. Like you don't have to struggle alone and you don't have to be depressed. You can look for help and you should look for help. And sometimes there's resources in institutes even to help you. The end of a PhD is a very particular process, but there is hope. There is an end. It will end. And yes, there's a lot of things you would like to have done different. There's a lot of things that could have gone better. Now, if you look back, you know exactly what you should not have done, but that's not fair, right? You cannot evaluate yourself 2 years ago compared to yourself now. I mean, that's not fair to your 2-year-old back self. So be kind to yourself. That's my advice. You will get there. Just be kind. But if you do feel like you need help, look for help. If you do feel like it's too much and you have to quit, quit. because nothing is more important than yourself. And I have a friend who quit her PhD with the thesis written, and she left. And she left because the paper was rejected, because turns out the wild type wasn't the wild type, and she had been deceived her entire PhD. And obviously, she didn't want to defend that because scientifically it was wrong. And she was already with antidepressants and with a lot of drugs on her, and she was already at the tipping point just to get the thesis finished. And that was just the tipping point. And that has been, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, more, because it was pre-COVID. And she's still recovering from that. So do not get to that point. Do not let it ruin your life, because there's so much more life outside of a PhD. There's so much more life outside of a PhD. And you do not need a PhD in your life at all. Like, there's a lot of medical writers who do not have PhDs. As I say, most of my friends don't even have a bachelor's degree. You don't need that to be happy with your life at all. You can, and that can make you happy. And I don't not regret have done my PhD, but you do not need that to be happy in your life. Do not look for happiness there. The job is not to make you happy. You have to make yourself happy.
Yeah.
A job is just a part.
Do not postpone your happiness in your life for the next degree and next milestone and next thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, a more concrete advice is something that I already mentioned here that did help me, was going back to Taekwondo, having those fixed hours. Because the thing is, if it is like, oh, going to the gym or doing yoga by yourself, you can do it at any time. That means you're never going to do it. Even in my Google Calendar, I put in that time, and that time goes out the window as soon as I have more work.
Yeah.
There was fixed days. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, there are practices. They start at that hour and they finish at that hour. And you need to be there, and you need to do it in those days.
Yeah.
Now, Fridays, I usually wouldn't go, because Friday evening, no one deserves that. But, having those days and having those hours and then being there, you're not a scientist, you're just a person. Reconnect to your person. If sports is not your thing, that's fine. Go and play board games. Go and read books if that's more your thing.
It has to be scheduled. It has to be like, you have to have some accountability and something.
Yeah, join a book club, right? So I go twice a month to a board game club where you just play board games together. That's scheduled, is on Sundays. And I make my weekends around those events, right? And you go and you socialize with people there.
Yeah.
With books, if you join a book club, you have to read the book by that time, right? So having that accountability, as you're saying, and book time for yourself outside of work.
Yeah.
And I know when you're deep in the PhD, that feels like the worst thing you can do,
because
and it's taking time away from your PhD, but that's exactly what you need, because you need to remind yourself that you're a person, and you'll be a better professional if you're a better person, if you're working on yourself.
Yeah.
My PhD moved forward so much more when I lived away from the lab, because I had that discipline and I had those schedules where it's Monday and I'll be in the lab at 8:30, and I'll leave at 5:30. And yes, people in the lab looked at me sideways. And yes, I heard a lot, oh, it's 5:30, you're taking the afternoon off? At some point I did answer to a certain person, you weren't here at 8 a.m. when I clocked in. So like, but you don't have to answer these people. It doesn't matter. But my PhD moved forward when I stopped working weekends, when I would be in the lab less time, because the time that I was there was making it count. But I was still a person outside of that time. And I think that's what we forget. We get too much into the deep of work that we forget the rest. So so my advice is, remind yourself, reconnect to whatever it is you did before. If it's books, if it's video games, if it's board games, I don't know, if it's knitting. I also tried that. Whatever works for you. If you don't know, make a list. Make a list of things that you used to do as a teenager, and each week you try a different one, and you see whatever works for you.
Whatever sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. And you try, you book hours and you go and you try things. And, everyone can take 2 hours away. 2 hours is like a failed PCR, in a short PCR. So, like, everyone can take those 2 hours and it's fine.
Yeah.
But take that time for yourself and then just keep moving forward. I think that's, the end, we'll get there. It's just, I think the PhD is about being stubborn, being persistent, more than actually being a good scientist, just not giving up.
Okay, well, that's gold. I think that's really good advice. This is also something that I keep repeating, that, you need to have something outside of it, some kind of identity that is not just I'm a PhD student. I must like, you are a person first and foremost. What makes you you, and not just you a PhD student or you a postdoc or whatever. So
I think
it is
it's so
very important.
important. And I was saying, like, most of my friends now, they don't have bachelor's degree, or they do, or some of them, I've been friends with them for like 3 or 4 months before I knew what they did for a living. It just never comes up. We
Yeah.
go and we have dinner, and we go and we play board games, and and we talk about life and, well, news. And currently there's always a lot of news to talk about. And then eventually sometimes it's like, oh, tomorrow is Monday and I have to go this and do that. And then we're like, oh, what do you do? I actually don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's so much more to a person when you actually meet them outside. And not everyone needs to be a scientist, and not everyone
Mm-hmm.
needs to do PhDs. And I think when I was doing my PhD, all my friends and all my network was scientists and was PhD, which is great. You also need these people because they are suffering with you. But with these people, you're just going to talk about this. And
Yeah.
if this isn't good, you're just going to be more down spiraling.
It's
And
going to be more ruminating. Yeah.
you need something to break the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope it was useful.
No, I'm sure.
And
I'm sure.
feel free to cut down half of what I said. It was way too long.
I think I will have to do some editing, but I think there is a lot of useful stuff, a lot of advice, a lot of like things that are like, just I'm sitting here in awe of you and your experiences and what you did, which again, as I said, it seems serendipitous, or it seems like it just landed for you, but it wasn't. Like, I've seen how much work you were putting into your science, and I'm sure that you were also putting work into like honing the skill of writing and getting to where you are now. And I'm sure it's only going to go upwards and onwards from here, which is what I wish for you. Thank you
same to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me this time. I know time is of the essence, and so I really appreciate that you were here with me answering my questions. And thank you to our listeners, hopefully listening for the entire conversation. And I'll put all your links in case there is somebody in need of medical writing or scientific writing. I'll put all your links in the description of the video and the podcast. And yeah, we'll see each other here soon.
Yeah, thank you. And people can always reach out and connect on LinkedIn and ask me if they need any more advice or whatever. Other people always also spend this time with me, so I like to spend it also giving back to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on this note, bye.
Bye-bye.